Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next edition of Dream Reality, a podcast brought to you by Idunn Consulting. This is a podcast where we talk to a wide range of experts in their field, people who are comfortable with change, who are innovators, who challenge the way we think. We're quite uncomfortable with change as human beings. We like to dive under the duvet and hide, and we like, things to be constant, to steady, and just plod along a little bit. But over the last 18 months, boy, have we embraced change, whether it be the way we school our kids, whether it be the way we go to the supermarket, or we do our actual job at home or in a facility. Everything has changed, and we've really embraced it. So this podcast is really a series where we take some ideas and concepts that you probably have seen in the news or read about online and talk about how we can bring them into business and how we can continue to ride the crest of the wave and drive for more positive change and try and make the world a little bit of a better place, using this as a platform to go for it. So today I am really excited, and this is our part 2 of diversity and inclusion series. We are going to talk to Jean. Jean is a master coach within the realm of neuroscience, and I hope I got that right, and she will correct me if I'm wrong. But she provides a wide range of coaching services to whoever wants to develop themselves and open up their mind a little bit. So we're going to be talking a bit about diversity and inclusion within the scope of ability today. And within that, people who are neurodivergent or have differing abilities that will be in the workplace. So Jean, I hand it over to you, and we'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey and a little bit about you.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much, Alison, for having me here today. We're no strangers to each other. We're obviously on the Ireland Together network, where we've got to know and enjoy just learning and growing together in our respective journeys along the way, which is a great learning experience. I'm certainly no stranger myself to change. I think it's all I've ever really known. So even hearing your own inspirational intro there on change and the different attitudes and approaches to it, we can all certainly become stuck at times, and sometimes even when we need to change, it can be overdue before we're actually even have the courage or the bravery to tackle maybe what it is we need to change in our lives in whatever different aspects. So I worked in the corporate environment for over 18 years. And I guess to fast forward with that, I left a couple of years ago. I guess the only way I can describe it is I got the coaching bug. And I initially qualified as an executive and life coach. And then all I can say is it consumed me. And I would describe myself as really ambitious in terms of I didn't ever want to have a person in front of me where I felt I didn't have all the skills and resources and that could enable them in some way. So I did go off and qualify as a coach in many different modalities, so that I could eventually qualify as a master coach. So the coaching that I coach in the areas are executive and life coaching, career coaching, neuro wellness coaching for wellness, self-care, performance, stress management, mind coaching for anxiety management, emotional intelligence coaching, embed coaching for multiple brain integration techniques to ensure head, heart and gut brains are aligned. And I'm even forgetting some of them there, but where I suppose along my own coaching career and coaching clients, one of the most important things is I coach with neuroscience. And to maybe just explain first what that means in a way that I hope people will understand it, that we're not logical linear human beings that think. Okay, we're biological, emotional beings that sometimes think. And within that, understanding what's going on in our head, what's going on in our bodies, as in our nervous system, and how we operate and function as humans. So coaching has really evolved and exploded in terms of what's now achievable through coaching when you coach with neuroscience, and when you're enabling others that come to you with a wide array of challenges, including, I guess it has really helped me recognize where there are differences in humans, especially through the coaching modality, where in recognizing that we're not all wired the same, and people with differing abilities, that their nervous system and brain operates different. So what I mean by that is, when we look at neurodiversity, it's looking at the different neurological differences in how people operate and function with their executive functioning skills, their nervous system, their brains. So things that maybe come naturally to some don't come naturally to others. And there's a strengths and a disabilities piece involved in it. And really, when we look at neurodiversity, it's really looking at it with a strengths approach.
Yeah, and we're going to touch on some of that as we go through. And I think just before we start, and it's something that people who have been listening and have signed up to the podcast recordings will notice that, and I'm going to just highlight it again. Once again, we have a guest that had a career and did a career pivot because they saw purpose, and they really, they did that. And that is really a recurring theme, that, the drive of purpose and understanding your values and really switching your career is something to be celebrated. And there's a lot of very, very successful people out there that have done that. And I think we're quite shy in celebrating that, because certainly most of the people, I do know Jane, so I knew she'd done it, but before we went into that level of depth, and my other podcast guests, I didn't know that they had gone through that journey. So it's incredibly enlightening to have that relationship and know that you're not alone in going down those journeys.
Yeah.
So just switching over to our diversity and inclusion topic, and I really appreciate that you started, you mentioned about neurodiversity.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful.
I know, and I apologize. I feel like I'm eating my tongue. So obviously this week specifically, the Euros final has just happened in the last couple of days, and diversity and inclusion has certainly been in the news. But I think that that's really from one aspect, and really why we're having a second podcast episode on this topic is really because, yes, you have racial diversity, yes, you have gender diversity, yes, you have ageism diversity, but there's so many other parts of diversity, whether it be the neurodivergence, whether it be the differing abilities, some seen, some unseen. And that's really what we're going to focus on here. And just to kind of kick it off a little bit, there was an amazing video, which will be linked in the show notes of this, where there was an individual that had Down syndrome, and they went to work in a bakery. And then the lawyer saw the person working in the bakery, and then hired someone of a similar ability in her office to do administrative tasks. And it went on and on and on, because they saw it as being normal and being open. And I thought that, and this was a really powerful video, and it really gave me chills actually about how people were really including them and identifying their skill set and their abilities and matching it in that way. So Generation Z as well are becoming more comfortable talking about their mental fitness, where they are in their mental strengths and the differing abilities of people. It's much more mainstream to say that, you know, I'm on the spectrum, or I have a level of autism, or I have a X, Y, and Z, or I have a hearing difficulty. Generation Z are certainly much more open and comfortable talking about these things than in my generation. But they're only coming into the workplace and they're not really in the leadership roles. So how can we make this comfort level more mainstream and make these differing abilities more acceptable?
Okay, that's a big question. It's a big question, and I suppose first of all, I'd like to say that so I come at this from diversity, inclusion, and belonging is where I come at it from. Under that umbrella, I suppose under our employment equality legislation acts, where when we look at the different dimensions, some of them you mentioned there, we'll say around the equality factors in the workplace, be it religious, religion, age, marital status, sexual orientation, whatever it is, where the disability is the one I zone in on.
Yeah.
And under disability, you're looking at a couple of different layers. So you're looking at disability can come in many forms, be it intellectual, be it physical, or be it even invisible. And it's the invisible piece really, I think, is where we highlight the whole neurodiversity piece, because within disability, we look at disability, we look at mental and emotional health, which is another area I really advocate through emotional intelligence and emotional wellness, and the neurodiversity piece in really recognizing through my interactions with clients that, oh, okay, so something is different here. And I suppose having a really inquisitive mind, peeling back the layers on actually what's going on here, what, you know, because normally, you know, this and this will work for a client, so it's not. So there's something off here, there's something else going on. And it's very true what you say about Generation Z, and, you know, they're coming into the jobs now where, but they're just starting off in that process. And I think it's brilliant in terms of the level of new awareness they're going to bring in to organizations. They have been integrated in the schooling system where disabilities in whatever form or neurodiversity is just the norm for them. They have teacher assistants and special accommodations being met in the classrooms. Like my son mentioned at one stage, you know, so someone has got sight issues and he's got special assistive technology for him for certain classes. And so there's a lot of different accommodations being made for disabilities across a wide range within our schooling service now. So this is what Generation Z are used to. And they're now coming into our workplaces where they're looking at, you know, this is the norm for them. And then it's kind of like they're actually getting shocked at what's not the norm in companies. So I suppose looking at your question, how do we make this more mainstream? Will we make this more mainstream? I guess where I'm advocating it and looking at making it more mainstream is educating people, okay? And there's commonalities across the board in terms of the challenges that companies are having, where the first thing is actually looking at what are the barriers that companies are faced with. And those barriers or that resistance to change is looking at what these common barriers are for a lot of companies across the board. So no differently from anyone else, I've gone and learned from all the experts what actually are these barriers in the companies. because I'm seeing firsthand from my clients what their barriers are. So often it's really looking at some of the questions that come and arise from companies. So it might be a question of, why bother? You know, what difference will this make if we have diversity, inclusion and belonging in our workplace? So I guess the answer to that is, when we look at 2016 consensus, because we know consensus in 2020, where 13.5% of the population has a disability, okay, 1 in 7, and that was in 2016. The World Health Organization have come along and said it's actually 1 in 5 that they believe has a disability, okay, and where 70% of disabilities are actually considered invisible. So in other words, yeah, I know they're big statistics. Yeah,
they are.
Yeah, really big statistics, but where that number of 13.5% is expected to exponentially just increase by 2016 to 20%. And it's because, speaking of generations, we have an aging population. And with the aging population, where people are going to end up with disabilities, be it through illness, mental and emotional health challenges, or neurodiversity conditions that haven't been diagnosed, which is what is actually happening. So this accounts for this increase in, we'll say, the older generations that are currently working, that are actually acquiring disabilities. So it's very prevalent now in the workplace, and it's a challenge now, okay? And it's been a challenge for a long time, but there's more noise being created about it now, you know.
Well, you have absolutely blown my mind. Those statistics, I'd never heard those, to be honest. And I can honestly say I do spend a lot of time thinking about these things. God knows when, but you know, I do. But I had never considered about the aging population and things. So I think that that's definitely a perspective that you've really opened my eyes to. Now, just to go back to something that you touched on there, is that not everyone, you know, sometimes, you said 70% of those that do have a differing ability, it's not visible.
Right.
And not everyone wants to share and have everyone in the workplace know that they have a differing ability. How can the leader help manage those types of situations?
Well, for starters, the people themselves don't know. So the people themselves don't even know, not to mind the leader is not knowing. So what we're actually seeing happen is, we'll say, kids are actually getting diagnosed with the likes of ADHD, or they're on the autism spectrum, or they've got dyscalculia, dysgraphia, you know, there's so many different comorbidities, or be it depression or generalized anxiety. And where with kids getting diagnosed, the attention and focus then actually gets turned on the parents, because a lot of these underlining conditions are, you know, inherited, and where actually the parents are recognizing and going for their appointments with their kids, oh, hang on a moment. And it's what I'm finding in the coaching space, where I'm meeting clients with performance challenges and different other, we'll say, struggles and challenges going on in the workplace for them, be it around their performance, around their coping mechanisms, around their stress management skills. And when you start to understand and peel back the layers of what's going on, then you start to see where all the traits are for ADHD, or for someone being on the spectrum, or, as I say, be it any of the other comorbidities. And it's one thing worth mentioning when we mention neurodiversity or divergent, it's the non-medical definition, so to speak, of these conditions, basically. So it's a non-medical view of it. So there's a medical and there's a cultural view of it. So just to differentiate between that. But then when we look at what can leaders do, well, really it's looking at what policies have they got in place, and having open and transparent policies around their diversity, inclusion and belonging policies in the workplace. And if they have open policies around this, it's not just good enough to churn out manuals at staff. They need to get professionals that are experts in neurodivergent, neurodiversity, in the comorbidities that go with it, in to actually give talks on this and educate employers and employees, and ensure that they have a transparent policy in place that, offers guidance and support to its employees on what are the steps in place, what is our attitude and what is our approach if you find yourself in a situation where these are your circumstances. And that would massively alleviate a lot of stress and worry, because the main thing is stigma for people finding out about their conditions. And really, I would say one of the biggest problems is worry about jeopardizing their job or their career in any way. And this is what will really stop people disclosing. And even when we look at the piece around disclosure, there's more than one way to go about it. So it will really depend on, everyone will be someplace different at it in terms of how it's impacting, we'll say, their functionality and their executive functioning skills and their performance. So every case needs to be taken on its own merit, and it's at an individual place for each individual as well, where they think, okay, well, if I'm diagnosed and if I go on stimulants for ADHD, that, they may want to gauge it and see how they're getting on, and they may adapt really well, where then they don't feel the need to disclose. So it depends. So it's really, I've come across clients and where they've said, look, it's at the stage now where they're afraid they're going to be getting the boot out the door, so to speak. And they've only just discovered or been diagnosed with conditions. So they're adapting and adjusting to being on the meds, which can take anything from 6 weeks to 6 months for people. So while they're adapting in that space, and at the same time, they want to ensure that they're getting back on track at work. And often it just comes to the point where they need to disclose to their employer so that their employer can actually understand, okay, this is what's going on, but now you're getting back on track. So, there's a lot of, I suppose, anyone I've encountered that has discovered they have the conditions, and in terms of the treatment and being able to now operate from the right user manual has made completely the world of difference to them. And it's been a massive turning point for them in how they're now able to perform and operate.
I love that. You've made such a good number of points there, and really my takeaway from that is it's education, it's normalizing it, it's having respectful conversations, and making sure that we have the right policies and things in place to protect employees. And yeah, I think it's very, very interesting. It's a very complex situation. And I love what you say, that every single case is different. So it's really important to provide the skills to the leadership teams to be able to understand and to manage and to help the employees. So yeah, no, that's
and so, just that it can be very simple accommodations actually that can be put in place for employees. So we'll say someone that is on the spectrum, for example, they just may need a quiet space to work in, or they may just need a quiet space to work in for priority tasking. And then there may be other times that, you know, they need that integration. So it can be to do with, you know, the lighting, if there's sensory overload going on with someone, or, you know, so it's different for everyone. It can also be to do with even having awareness on how we communicate. People have a lot of different communication requirements in terms of how specific they need that communication to be. So sometimes it's just very simple accommodations that's required, and it depends on what that disability is. If it's, you know, but there's grants available, that's really important to note. So, you know, for smaller businesses where they think, oh, okay, now I have to start making accommodations for staff, that can be quite maybe daunting for them. But there's grants available that they can avail of. Yeah.
And I think that that's an excellent point, and I love that you've made this, you know, you've referenced it, that it's not just for large organizations, but the small businesses can be such inclusive and belonging environments as well. And I just want to go a little bit further with one of your points about, you know, how it's really on soft skills and communication skills. Because now it seems that if you pull any book off, any leadership book off your bookcase, they give you a list of what it takes to be a successful leader. And you need to get all of those ticks, otherwise you're going to fail. And it's quite descriptive and quite strong messaging in most of it. But sometimes some people with differing abilities will find some of these skills quite hard on the way they communicate or the way they understand and they interact with people sometimes. But yet they might be really, really good at their job, and, you know, and maybe, you know, a really, you know, could potentially have a very successful career. So how can we, whilst acknowledging there are certain things that we mainstream deem essential, or they need to have them to be, you know, a successful leader, but some people don't always have them to the same level, they have a differing ability. How can we make sure that employees with different abilities within soft skills can have a career and a progressing career rather than just a job?
Yeah, and I love that you said that, and that you're asking that. And I think it's a wake-up call as well for people. You know, I'm seeing people making a lot of changes as well when they get a diagnosis. And we'll say people with ADHD, for example, they have a very interested only operating nervous system. So where they will like excel and, you know, maybe even suffer from hyperfocus or time blindness in terms of the level of engagement they have when they're actually interested in the job. So I think it's really important to decipher first, you know, especially with people getting newly diagnosed in that, to even just revisit where they're at in their career. You know, are you actually in the right job for yourself, first of all? Because no amount of accommodations is going to help someone if they're not in the right job for themselves. And then secondly, if people do wish to remain in their jobs, we're no different than, we'll say, neurotypical people. There has to be a review and feedback process along the way, and really understanding what motivates and drives people and what makes them tick, and where within that process, even understanding how we give feedback, because we can, so if we can contract even in terms of what that feedback space looks like, because if people are just constantly being told what they can't do or what they're not good at, okay, that's just going to, you know, see employees take a nosedive in terms of their confidence, their ability. But if we're drawing people's strengths to the surface, you know, we're looking at feedback in terms of, well, what's working well, what needs improving, and how can we implement that? Yeah. But actually, in how that feedback is being delivered. And I would strongly recommend operating a coaching, we'll say, format in that space. So instead of being so quick to maybe tell people or advise people, actually, you know, flip the situation and say, you know, so, well, what do you think? How are you doing? What's working?
I love
them,
that.
Yeah. So flip it, because it can often be, we're all learning, we're all evolving, we're all growing, and where we can often come through doing a project or working in different situations, and the learning that occurs in that, we all learn from our mistakes even. And I suppose sometimes if we have someone ready to jump on what those mistakes are, but instead actually, first of all, see what learning has occurred for that person. And it will give you more reassurance as well as an employer in terms of understanding what level of awareness they have and what learning is taking place for them. And then by all means, come in that mentor advisory role for, you know, to help them bridge the difference and where they need. But yeah, and understanding as well what people's communications needs are. So in other words, if an individual, as I say to my clients, help your employer to help you. Okay, so if you are disclosing, then, you know, saying these are where maybe my challenges are, but this is what will help with them. So if I get help with this, or if we can communicate in this way. So some people, for example, are visual. Some people, if they get instructions verbally, it'll go in one ear and it'll go out the other ear. So they need an email afterwards. And it'll be just these small little tweaks. Some people just don't like to be overloaded. So they'll come away, they won't want to look foolish in a situation or a meeting, and they might get the gist of it, but they may not have that clarity. So at the end of conversations, even double clicking and summarizing so that people walk away with clear expectations. So there's a lot of communication guidelines that we can give that will help employees to help their employers to help them. And I think that onus sometimes where, you know, people can think, oh, my employer doesn't understand me, or my employer doesn't get me. So sometimes employees need to help them to help them progress and how they're going to move forward.
I think that's amazing, Jane. I mean, you've really, I think that you've made this, you know, I put this question to you, but, you know, I thought it was going to be, you know, really hard, but you've really broken that down into things that are really tangible and things that any leader can do easily as part of their everyday. And I think that really my takeaway personally on this is that this is not a big problem. We're making this a big problem, and we should be talking about it and supporting the differing abilities and their differing strengths, but you should be supporting your employees anyway. And it's just understanding, and it's the good communication and understanding, and it coming from a place of good, which really can really bring the employee on. You've really hit it home to me there today. I really appreciate that. I'm a little bit conscious of time, so I'm going to go straight into dream reality. So this podcast is called Dream Reality, and that is intentional because this is an opportunity. We are in a period of opportunity. So if you could dream of your nirvana future, what would that look like? And then, unfortunately, with a bit of reality check, what do you think it's actually going to turn out like?
In terms of the diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Okay.
Yes.
So the dream reality, I'll just reflect for a moment. Yeah, it would be presented in a way that, like it is currently in the school systems, where it's just the norm, that is universal, and that someone doesn't feel under duress or that they're asking for special favors. That it's just considered the norm, because it is, and the only thing that's not the norm is the stigma and worried about people coming forward. So they're struggling through, and they're masking an awful lot of their invisible disabilities. So the dream would be if people didn't have to mask, and if it was as simple for people to just shrug their shoulders and, you know, oh, I'm neurodiverse, you know, and that it's no big deal. And that people understand that, oh, you know, and it's just literally no big deal. That's where it would be. That would be the dream. So
and the reality
is that there is a lot of fantastic organizations out there. Caroline Casey, that they reached their landmark of 500, that milestone in May of 500 organizations, getting them on board with the whole disability piece in their organizations, and getting them on board in that. That's just one organization of many. There's Ask I Am, there's Open Doors, there's Lexic, there's just so many resources out there. There's neurodiversity and the law, there's assistive technology for all the different disabilities. There is so much help and support out there for companies that are showing an interest and maybe starting to dip their toes in the water. So, and where in getting highly involved in this whole area and learning from all the expertise, what I have done is, you know, I have my workshops put together where I can provide people with that A to Z on diversity, inclusion and belonging. So regardless of what's going on, so that they can have a playbook and that they know where to start. But like, so I've learned from the expertise of JP Morgan, EY, the people that have done it before. So people are already out there doing it. So to keep learning from the experts that, you know, are leading the way for us. And that's the reality. And in terms of, you know, getting momentum going in companies where leaders can basically get buy-in and influence it by organizing members of staff, employees that are genuinely interested. Okay, and you will find you'll be find that there'll be someone in their career that maybe they want to get involved in a project or something worthwhile, especially after coming through the pandemic. I feel now more than ever there is a greater level around mental and emotional wellness, which neurodiversity comes totally under that bracket, and where people want to help people. Okay, and that's not naivety on my behalf. It's where people engage their heart, brain, and in the work. You know, we've more than one brain, we've more than this cephalic head brain. So the reality is I'd love to see people engaging their heart, brain more as well, and getting the right people involved that really want to be involved, that it doesn't become tokenistic work that is just ticking another box for the sake of compliance. That bit, okay, if it means it gets results and makes more progress with it, great. But I'd love there to be some heart and soul ignited in it, by the people that really care.
Love that. Yeah, I love that, you know, the normalization of it, has been done in the schools, so that we're no longer talking about it. It's just like, yeah, all right. Yeah, all right. I love that. You know, just the okay. And so what?
It is normal.
So what?
And
for someone to say,
you
know, okay, I am autistic, and then someone to turn around and go, and, you know, what's your point? You know, that would be such a lovely situation to be in. You know, I love that.
What I'd love better is that for someone to just turn around and be able to say, oh, cool. Because, you know, it's if someone mentions that, it's important to them.
Yes.
And that we don't discredit that person in any way. It's because maybe it's for people on the autism spectrum, that can be very much part of their identity. So some people will see it in the first person, and some people will see it in the second person, in terms of, for some people, it's a medical condition, whether they have ADHD or autism or whatever other comorbidities. And it's exactly that, it's a medical condition. For others, it will be really a part of their identity. So how people feel about it even is, you know, it's entirely different.
Fascinating. You know, it's such, I think it's just, you know, it's such a large spectrum and of information and differences and things, and it's just so much to think about. And I really, you know, thank you so much for your points today. You know, you really, you know, demonstrated that, you know, small changes and small adjustments, can really make a difference to individuals. But it's all about understanding and communicating with those individuals to know what works for them.
And
I really, you know, it's been
caring steps.
Yes, you're a fountain of knowledge for this, and I would suggest to people, if they have more questions, to reach out to Jane, and I'm sure she'd be more than happy to support with more information. But on a slightly lighter note, I did ask for a couple of recommendations.
Okay.
So the first one is either a book or a podcast that you love or you recommend to people.
Okay. So you mentioned purpose earlier. So the funny thing is, no matter what book or course or anything I'll do, there always has to be a why or a purpose involved. I can't just pick up something for the sake of it. So one book that I would highly recommend it's by Ruby Wax, and it's Mindfulness for the Frazzled. And it's a super book because it includes a 6-week tutorial that bring people through a step-by-step process on learning mindfulness, the techniques within mindfulness itself. But then for anyone that loves to understand themselves, their neurobiology, their neurochemistry, anyone that's remotely into neuroscience, it's jam-packed with neuroscience, but in a very explainable way that makes sense. And then Ruby Wax has the most fantastic, outrageous sense of humor.
She's awesome. She's so funny.
She's super. She's so funny, but she's so real and human as well. So, you know, you're learning so much in reading this book, and actually just having a laugh along the way as well. So it's kind of, you're reading a bit and then it's like, did she really just say that? Oh my God, fair play to her. So so I just totally loved her book.
That is a great recommendation. Absolutely going to the top of my reading list. I didn't know she had that one, so great. And then if you're just feeling a little bit down or a bit low energy, what is the song that you put on your playlist?
Okay, God, I wish there was a simple answer to that, because I love music, but it depends on the mood I'm trying to generate. So it's, you know, if I'm being lazy about going out for my run, then maybe it's Mina Lou Lund. She's a Norway girl. She sings Unstoppable. So that's really if I want to get that upbeat piece going. If I want to, you know, crank up my creativity, it might be a bit of Mozart or Bach or, you know, some classical music. It's just totally motivational. And maybe if it's I just want to reset. So when people think of that pickup, it's not always about going up decimals in terms of high energy. You might want that pick up to reset yourself, but more in a mindful or calming, relaxing way. So it's Gayatri Premal. She kind of plays. It's very therapeutic, mystical almost type music, that really just invokes a sense of just surreal calmness and peace. And yeah, it's fabulous. You know, if you just want to visit that nice intentional place. So physiologically, when we change ourselves physiologically, we accelerate then psychologically how we feel, and we can really fast track that. So you know, anything from depending on what it is, the mood we're trying to generate, we can intentionally do that through music, and that's something I love doing for myself, actually.
Great. I love it. I love it. Well, look, thank you so much, Jane, for your time today.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure.
You're an absolute fountain of knowledge on this topic, and I certainly have learned so much just through this short conversation. And you know, I really appreciate your time and direction on this. So really heartfelt thank you.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I'm sure I'll see you in 2 weeks' time anyway in our usual Bridge to Success session. So take care in the meantime. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.